You know, I'm like a super chaparra. That's actually really, people get really freaked out about that. Like when they meet me, they're just like, oh, it's so nice to meet you. But I can see that they're just like, oh, she's so short. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And this podium is not too bad. You know, some podiums are not chaparra friendly because, you know, it's kind of. But I did actually want to, first of all, thank you so much for having me. And, you know, kudos to you for getting me out here on a Saturday morning. But and it's because I feel very strongly about the work that you're doing here at the program, the entire program. And as you know, we have had a lot of you students up in our newsroom. Can you guys hear me okay? Or do we need to? So yeah, and you know, when I got to New York City a billion years ago, when there were 3 Mexicans here, there was not, this was not happening. So this is actually really exciting, and this is like where I get very happy, right? For the state of journalism, to see all of you guys doing this, engaging, talking about specifically the role of Latinx journalists. So thank you, and that's why I'm here, is because I want you guys to know. Hola, Borja, ¿cómo estás? So I hear you were in the news a little. I didn't know until this morning, so okay. Good to see you. What can I say? Good to see you, Borja. The last time we saw each other was in Medellin. Our piece on Medellin is dropping, I think, next week. I made this beautiful return to Medellin to be part of the Gabriel García Márquez Fundación de Periodismo conference, which is like the best. If you can ever go, you should go. It's so amazing in Medellin. And I had been to Medellin 30 years before, when there were bombs going off, and so this was the return, our return to Medellin, and our piece is coming out next week, so I'm so excited, and it's good to see you, Borja. So anyway, yeah, so this is a moment where I'm telling you, and we're on the record? Okay, well then I guess that curtails a few words. So I just want to say that you guys need to, low-key, you need to own your power. Low-key, if you're going to be a journalist, you totally get that right now it's not about the fame, it's not about the money, for sure, it's about the mission, right? You need to understand that. Like, that is at your core, and the way I started out in journalism was that I waited tables at Caramba. Nobody remembers it. It was a restaurant. It was like, ooh, Mexican food in New York, Caramba. Wait, let me see what time it is. What time is it? I forgot to bring my... Ah, okay, perfect. Okay, ooh, countdown, nice. All right, so let me just cut to the chase. I want to read a little bit of the speech that I wrote. Actually, it's a speech that I just gave in Wichita, Kansas. And this is what I was saying to them. I said, because I want you to know how I talk when I'm in places like Wichita or Nebraska or Chicago, or this is the same way that I talk. And I just said, you know, I said, I am so loved. Like, I have an amazing husband who's an amazing artist. If you are interested in art, follow him at Germán Pérez Art on Instagram. He's the Dominican Chagall, so I love him. I love it's true, seriously. We've been married 27 years. I adore him. I have 2 amazing kids. I have an extraordinary staff. I basically have my own company. You know, not basically, I have my own company. Like, so, you know, like I work for other people, but, you know, I basically am in control. So I have a lot of places to feel a lot of joy and happiness and love. And yet, you know, I woke up actually in Wichita that morning to images of children being held by our government, you know? And I woke up with these words in my head, la hielera y la perrera. I don't have to explain to you what those are. Wait a second. Okay, low-key, does anybody not know what a hielera is? Okay, I'm going to assume that there's somebody who doesn't know. So la hielera is the place where all, or the majority of undocumented immigrants who are caught when they are crossing the border, or at any time when they are being put into detention, they are oftentimes put, number one, first place, into something called la hielera, which is the icebox. By the way, been happening for years. Years and years and years and years, la hielera. Ask anybody who has crossed. Anybody. La persona que te está trayendo la pizza. Óyame, ¿Usted conoce algo que se llama la hielera? Oh, sí. No signs of torture. So you were cold. So that's been happening for years. Something that is a little new because of the policies of this administration, we know now, is another term that we have known for a while, but that now will be part, or you should know, which is la perrera, which are the cages that they are putting our children in. And I was like, why cages? Well, because if you have toddlers and 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds, they want to run around. You got to put them in a cage. Plus, I don't know, we're referred to as animals. So cages, yeah. I wake up thinking about Pablo Villavicencio Calderón. You guys know who he is? He's the dude who was delivering pizza there at the Brooklyn Army, who's done it like forever. And because the Army has now been deputized as immigration agents, they called ICE on him, right? He's got 2 citizen children and a wife. Very, very possibly he's going to be deported, if not already. By the way, what a great name, Pablo Villavicencio Calderón. Óyeme, John Smith, take that, boom. I woke up thinking about Manuel Antonio Cano Pacheco. You guys are like, who's that? He grew up, he was DACA in Des Moines. His dad gets put away in prison for drugs, and he's on DACA, he's in college, but basically his world starts to crumble, because he's a human being, and he gets caught drinking and driving because he's a teenager or a young person, bad, not fully formed brains yet, we know that, not that they're bad, but just not fully formed. And he gets deported, because he's a terror threat to this country. And he gets deported to Zacatecas, and not too long later, his throat is slit. He was like on his way to college. He was in college. He died in Zacatecas. I'm thinking about Martín Martínez, who we reported on because of the great work of Fernanda Chavarri, who found him doing his ICE check-in here at Lower Manhattan. He was doing his ICE check-in. He was 50 years old, 52, 3 years old. He had come to New York, más o menos the same time that I had come to New York, and he had made a family, had kids who went to college, were professionals, and he did his ICE check-in. They said, yeah, no, time for you to go. And long story short, he's in detention. He doesn't have his medication for his heart problems and for his diabetes. Then he's deported to the small town out in un pueblito por allá, because that's the only place where he had a family member. Maybe if he had been to Mexico City, he could have gotten his medication, and he could have gotten a job at a big box store like the one that he worked in here, and he knew how to do. But he was in un pueblito por allá. And long story short, he has 2 strokes and he's dead. We're not all going to make it. We are not all going to make it. And I also woke up thinking, at this point when I wrote this, guys, Kate Spade and her daughter, because Kate Spade and her daughter are actually friends with someone who I work with. You wouldn't know that, but yeah. And then, of course, now I had to add Anthony Bourdain. And I ran into a friend from El Salvador that same morning. I was crying on the street after reading a tweet from Lulu Garcia Navarro that said that what had happened with Anthony Bourdain. And I didn't even know Anthony Bourdain. I didn't even watch his show. I have a thing with CNN. We'll talk about that in a minute. And so I was crying, and then I came and I saw her, y le digo, ¿sabes qué? Este señor, el chef, el de CNN, y se acaba de matar, y ella dice, ¿qué? Dice, mi mamá trabajó con él, mi mamá fue la persona que le dio el trabajo, los primeros trabajos en las cocinas. Fue mi mamá trabaja, o sea, that's off the record though, yeah. Because I had to struggle at that point, that's a journalist, but yeah, so I woke up thinking about the fact that, 114 people were taken because When you work in a gardening depot in Ohio, you could potentially be a terrorist. That was kind of a joke. The nightmare, right, is that the numbers are about the same as under the Obama administration. I wake up thinking about Estrella, the undocumented Mexican trans woman who was taken from the courtroom by plainclothes officers and then put into an unmarked car. I think about the fact that I have a student who last week told me that he was in his suburb outside of Chicago and he got followed by a black Jeep or SUV, no sé, and some dude came out in plain clothes and took his information and identified himself as an ICE agent. I'm thinking about my student who is an honors student whose mom was just told, even though she filed everything for the green card, one paper was missing, now she's got to go back to Guatemala and she wants to take my student with her. Goodbye, college, goodbye, fellowship. Goodbye being an honors student. So how did this happen, right? I mean, damn, papi, may you rest in peace, tenías razón. Óyeme, mi papá, como que Estados Unidos, I don't know. We were like, no, Dad. My greatest achievement was when I made it to Time magazine, because that was the magazine my dad read. My other greatest achievement was when I ended up on Meet the Press, because my father watched that. By then, he was just months away from his death. And then Meet the Press stopped asking me to be on. Don't know why. So, you know, what happened? Well, look, we know. One of the things that happened is as you know, that's why I'm so happy to see you all, because there is less diversity now in our American newsrooms than there was before 9/11, right? So when you, my thing about CNN is that I was working there during a time when CNN created Lou Dobbs. CNN created and emphasized the creation of his nightly Broken Borders report that was showing the images of people literally climbing over that wall. That was a joke. You guys loosen up a little. You gotta laugh. They created that for ratings. I witnessed it. I saw what it was like. We knew that lives would be at stake, you know, and then I was told, well, you have an agenda. You know, these are Latino stories, these are immigrant stories, these are the stories of other people's minority stories. Of course not. These are American stories. And that's what you need to know. You need to own that deeply. These are American stories. And frankly, what we are is that we are, and this is what saves me, seriously, this is what saves me. And thank God for journalists like Juan Gonzalez and Joe Torres, who wrote the great book of News for All People, right? The history of people of color in American journalism. It was there donde me cayó el 20, right? And so then my heroes, right, are people, essentially, Frederick Douglass, love and adore him. Because if he could do it, we can. Seriously. Ida B. Wells. So you guys know what the story was with Ida B. Wells, right? But it is core to who we are now. Because when you're a journalist, you know that that is something that you have in your core. You have, like, you are a journalist. They're always like, you have an agenda. It's like, no, cabrones, you don't understand. We're journalists first. Wherever we are, we're journalists first. Because that's in our blood. It's in our blood, right? So when black journalists knew what was happening, that people were being lynched in front of crowds of people, they knew that was a news event. It was a news event. When they wanted to cover those stories, they were told what? That they had an agenda, that they were so political, that they were so unpatriotic. Why did they want to bring that into the newsroom? It wasn't news. I haven't asked this question, but where were the Japanese American journalists at the time when Japanese American forget the Japanese, American citizens were being imprisoned? Or were we already that untrustworthy that we couldn't even be inside the newsroom? Not like any of us have been escorted out of a newsroom or a news conference. I lost my place. Hold on, it's just that I'm watching the time. I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. There's so many things that I want to say to you. Okay, hold on. Okay. It's not exactly in order, but that's okay. You can follow with me. So I'm telling you these stories because I'm trying to reflect back to you who you are, who you already are. You are collectors of stories. Everywhere you go, there is a story. Everywhere you go, there's somebody to talk to interview, to get information from. And of course, we identify ourselves, you know, once we're in the process of doing our professional work. But come on, there are so many stories everywhere. And that's my sourcing is the fact that I'm on a plane all the time. It's very, very difficult. But it allows me to get out. So recently I was in Omaha. I happen to love Omaha and Nebraska. And I got in the lift, and it was a white guy who was like in his mid-50s. And he was like, you look familiar. And I was like, does he know who I am? I don't know. And he was like, yeah, I don't know. I watch Fox and MSNBC. I was like, okay. Anyway, so then very quickly, after I got into the car, I asked him, I said, can I ask you a personal question? Yes. Who did you vote for? Oh, I voted for Trump. I'm like, cool, so why? He's like, well, you know, I really want that wall. I really want that wall because I want to keep out those drug dealers and the gangbangers. And I said, cool. I said, but you live here in Omaha, so have you seen the drug dealers and gangbangers? Because there's a huge Latino population right here in Omaha. And he was like, no, you got me. I was like, sir, I'm not trying to get you. I was just asking a question. Then he said, well, anyway, listen, I voted for Trump because I really believe in the Muslim ban. I want to make sure that there are no terrorists who are getting into the country. And I said, okay. Well, you live in Omaha, right? Yes. I said, there's a large Muslim population here. He said, yes, yes. In fact, my neighbors, such nice people. I said, so have you seen them? He said, who? I said, the terrorists. The Muslim terrorists. Oh my God, you got me again. I said, sir, I wasn't trying to get you. Beautifully, he was able to say, wow, you're telling me I need to basically look around me and see things as opposed to listening to what I'm being told. I said, yes, sir. He said, wow, you're so smart, as I was getting out of the car. He said, where are you from? I said, I'm Mexican. And he was like, what? My heroes. Frederick Douglass did the impossible. Ida Wells, who really was the investigator. She was the investigative journalist. Studs Terkel, who great listener, plus he's from Chicago. Go Chicago. Elena Poniatowska. I have a really faded out post-it that I really must rewrite. It says, quoting her, en Latinoamérica se practica el periodismo de la indignación. En Estados Unidos se practica el periodismo de la indignación. And that is not taking sides. That is not taking sides. If we cannot be indignant over the denial of due process of people and children whose only difference between them and them is that they were not born in this country, just like me. My hero, Edward R. Murrow. Justice. Walter Cronkite. Dude, because I remember watching him. He actually chose humanity over balance. Balance. He chose humanity. I worked for him. I wrote for him. It's too long of a story to tell, but I actually wrote for him, and he was amazing actually in person. And mis compañeras mexicanas, Blanche Petrich y Lidia Cacho. By the way, Blanche Petrich taught me how to be a badass because she's disabled and was in the jungles at the time in El Salvador and Nicaragua, and Lidia Cacho, who taught me how to meditate. Lidia Cacho, who taught me how to meditate. So this is, again, a little tiny commercial for you. because we are talking about them sharing these stories because you have them too. And you're just like, oh my God, that's so important what she's saying, that's so important. It's the same thing that you're saying. It's the same thing that you're seeing. It's the same thing that you need to bring into your newsrooms. And I'm going to talk in a minute about the difference of where I am in my career and where you are in your career, because we have to talk about that and engage in that, and that's okay. But for a second, just a little tiny commercial about protecting yourselves, right? So this is like, you know, this is really serious, tough work. And when I was younger and I was in the war zones, yeah, definitely I bounced back a lot faster, plus the war zones were farther. Medellin, Peru, El Salvador, Nicaragua, you know. And then I became a mom, and then the war zone was a subway right away, right? And I was covering a story every single day for a year. So I developed PTSD. Interestingly, just a little quick sidebar, just because, again, you never know who you're going to meet where. The person who ended up treating me through my acupuncturist, doing kind of Reiki healing for my PTSD and my trauma, ended up being a multimillionaire who ended up being the woman who funded my nonprofit. True story. That I can't tell the whole story because I have very few minutes left, like 8 minutes and 34 seconds. So I need you to focus on the self-care. And the self-care looks a lot like taking care of ourselves, but it also means, you know, to do our work, you guys, we have to have ridiculously big egos. I need you to walk around with big-ass egos, actually. You're laughing. I need you to walk around with a huge ego. Just be like, hell yes. In your case, I represent Latinas, the most powerful demographic, not the most powerful consumer group in the United States of America. What do you have on me, sir? You need to walk around with a big ego, right? And at the same time, you need to live in total and absolute humility. Total and absolute humility for the people who are speaking with you, who are sharing their stories with you, and for the family members and friends who have to put up with us in this insanity, right? Thank God my husband, you know, I'm like, oh my God, this country, ay Dios mío, and he's like, it's so fascinating, porque él es dominicano, and he's, you know, he lived through a dictatorship, so he's like, it's the battle for democracy, this is like fascinating, you know, and it's like, he's so upbeat about it. And I'm just like, you know, so we have to find ways to love ourselves, right? And to give love back to the people who are with us. And we have to be able to drop the work. You know, we really have to be able to drop the work, and we have to be able to be there for our families. You know, what I do is I do therapy. I'm very public about the fact that I do therapy. I have the most amazing therapist, Argentina, a propósito. La adoro. Oh, yeah. You know, the highest per capita number of psychotherapists in the world is in Buenos Aires. She's amazing. I go boxing also. I go boxing. I do Zumba. I run. I connect with nature. I have a bird feeder on the fire escape of our Harlem apartment so I can see birds. Yeah, so I can see and talk to the birds, because I've also lost so many people over the last decade, it's not even funny. Ugh. And they're making us strong, right? So that's the other thing. You know, one of the classes that I teach at DePaul, I used to teach a class up until last year called Latinas Mental Health and Depression, because we know Latina teenagers have the highest rate of attempted suicide in our country. This year, the class is Latina Strategies for Resistance and Ancestral Power, because we are looking inside of ourselves to find out how are we going to survive this. Because we need you. I need you strong. So I know that you're looking at her and you're like, you know, oh my God, look what she's done. Yes. Okay. Different parts of our careers, different moments. I was the first one, you guys. I was the first Latina walking into the newsroom at NPR, at CNN, even at PBS. It's like, seriously? We're at a different place now. It's a very different dynamic. But one thing, again, at my core was that I knew good journalism, which was not about kind of taking sides. It's like I just knew that great story. And that, you guys, that's the core of what you're learning here. You know it's a good story. Maybe you don't get to do it for 20 years, but you know it's a good story. Hold on to that. And plus, who you are, your Latinidad is part of that strength as a journalist, if you want it to be. by the way. You know, some of us don't care, frankly. That's not where, I mean, ¿cómo se llama? Elena B. Enriquez from the New York Times, you know, who's Latina, but she's a business reporter. You know, I think she's no longer. She made that great film about Madoff, by the way, amazing. But if you want it, if you need it, if it's a part of you, heck yes, that's part of what you're bringing into the newsroom because it's going to make for better journalism. It's not because you're doing good or your editors are doing good, it's because you're doing good journalism, por Dios. And plus, as you know, and you know you have this in your back pocket, there's nothing there. Okay. It's good business sense. It's absolutely good business sense. So, you know, quick backstory. I was born in Mexico. I was raised on the south side of Chicago. I came in 1979 to New York City to be an actress and to go to Barnard. The acting part didn't work out. You can laugh. But watch, I'm going to be off Broadway soon, don't you? It's going to happen. Oh, I'm totally going to make that happen. You know, and then I end up getting these positions. And, well, really never believed that I could be a journalist because there were no Latino, Latina journalists on a national scale. The only one was Geraldo, who was actually doing kick-ass work at Willowbrook. So, but I never thought I could do this. And my career counselor at Barnard was like, you've got to apply for that internship at NPR. And that's how it all started. I was doing college radio. But I never saw myself reflected, so why would I even think I could do it? So that's where you guys are so lucky, right? You not only have models, but you're making your own models. I have all of these great positions. I do great work for other people. And 8 years ago, basically, I was out of work. And I was like, what am I going to do? Am I going to try and get a job like, you know, doing minute 30 reports for the networks and fighting for airtime? Are you kidding? Nah. And that's when I have this insane idea, basically, to create my own company. I don't think I understood the urgency of that moment. I knew that we had just seen a 43% demographic growth of Latinos from the year 2000 to 2010. I knew about the numbers, but I was a journalist, and now suddenly I was going to be running my own company. So these times, they challenge us. And again, you're here. So you have made it, like you've seriously made it. And I know that you guys are struggling. I have all of my students who are struggling with a lot of the same issues that you are. But you have total privilege now, and therefore responsibility, and therefore the urgency to hone your craft, to be the best journalist that you can be. And some of us are going to move into the place of either opinion writing, right? So maybe it's not hardcore investigative. And some of us, like at this point in my career, I have to accept and understand that I am seen as something of a leader, which is kind of like, but I feel a responsibility. I have different battles than you do right now. And I'm worried for some of you because of the challenging markets out there. But that's when you've got to double down. And I remind you, I was waiting tables and doing journalism. That's because that's how much I believed in it. Fun news, I'm the newest and I think the first Latina contributor to CBS Sunday Morning. So that's new, which is pretty cool. But of course, you know what my dream is. My dream is to get to 60 Minutes, and I'm not, you know, and so you guys are like, we're pitching, we're trying. I did the same thing. I was with the executive producer of 60 Minutes, and I was like, right up in his ear, hey, you should have laughed at that. I'm still pitching, right? I'm still pushing. I'm still trying. It never stops. So that's the other thing. Please don't be like, oh my God, and then I'm going to get to the position, it's going to be all like cool, and it's, no, not in life and not in your career. And I guess I put here the responsibility of privilege, right? The responsibility of privilege. And I just want to give you one quick example of what that looks like in my newsroom. We never use the term illegal to refer to a human being. We don't use the term minority does not exist in our newsroom. And me personally, I haven't said this in the newsroom. Me personally, you won't hear me use the term slave. It's a person who became enslaved. And you won't ever hear me talk about Japanese internment, because that was imprisonment. So, we are in a fight. We are in a fight for our profession, and we are in a fight for our narratives. We are in a fight for journalism, and we're in a fight for journalists of conscience. We are in a fight for the facts, for the facts, for the facts, that are not different, but we are there now, you are there, challenging with the truth. Because a president has called us illegal infiltrators who are animals. I am not, and I will not stay silent. Why? Porque ese es mi deber humano y porque ese es mi deber periodístico y profesional. Thank you. All right, so come on, come at, have at me. Questions?
I have a question.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Lucia. I'm a big fan of your work. Kind of wanted to ask you, I hear a lot of journalists talking about the dreamer narrative. I work with this organization called Movimiento Cosecha. And one of the things that we work on is talking about the 11 million. And I feel like as much as I continue to see journalists talking about, dreamers, we continue to forget and kill the dreamer narrative. And as someone who has been undocumented, who decided to take the term dreamer away from my life and kind of understand that we're leaving behind the nannies, we're leaving behind the labor workers. How can we get journalists, how can we get in the newsroom and say, we need to start talking about the 11 million? And we need to, I understand that dreamers are important, someone who has been in the movement for 10 years, but I'm starting to notice that, especially with like Latinx reporters and journalists who are writing, we're forgetting about them. And I'm wondering what is the need for, as someone who pitches those stories, like what is my need?
Well, so people don't, people have short memories, but there was a moment when there was a transition actually led by the Democrats that was all about, let's just do this piecemeal because it's just too terrifying, the idea of legalizing, 10 million brown people. That's just too scary. So again, already the response was to a narrative that was created by a newsroom that was run predominantly by white men who were looking at us and seeing a narrative of this feels very scary. So, I don't have an easy answer for you. I'll tell you what I'm trying to do in my reporting, and both on Latino USA, whenever I'm on MSNBC, which I think I'm going to be on tomorrow between 10 to noon, but they always cancel, so you never know. Is I'm talking about, there was a thing called comprehensive immigration reform. There was once a thing called comprehensive immigration reform. Because once you went down this road, it was going to be this. It was going to be somehow families against families. So I think we just have to be constantly engaging with that narrative. So it isn't a one thing. All of that work that you've and others have been doing to create a point where people understood what dreamers were, and it's like, yeah, now really, no, right? Like they finally got on Saturday Night Live, right? And now it's like, actually, it's more complicated. It's like all immigrants, whoa, too complicated. So we have to do granito por granito to just say, let's talk about this. And that's why the story of El Jovencito que se murió in Zacatecas is so sad, because it is. It's like you have to be perfect. You have to be perfect. And it's not a way to live. It's completely unrealistic. So, but I'm afraid that we have a lot of work to undo this. A lot of work. But be talking about that. Learn comprehensive immigration reform. Learn what we were talking about. Learn those terms and understand that way back when, woo, in 1986, when Immigration Reform and Control Act was signed into law by Ronald Reagan, you know, one of the big fights then was that, and I was like just stopping being an activist and moving into being a journalist, and I remember people were like, this is not amnesty. We will not accept that you call it amnesty. That's what we were fighting over. I know. It was like we were legalization, not even normalization. We were like, we're normal. You're not normalizing anything. And I'm just like, wow, those were like beautiful arguments to be having back then. Suerte.
I'm really a big fan of you, so it's really great to actually meet you in person. Now that you mentioned the word activism, I just want to hear your thoughts on how do you feel about being a journalist, but also having that side of activism and advocacy for specific issues that, you know, in this case, it would be immigration. So how do you feel about activism and journalism? A lot of people could say, no, that's not, if you're a journalist, you should be just a journalist and not an activist, but that's actually what I'm doing right now. I do a lot of journalism and a little bit of activism, so how do you feel about that?
So for me, you know, if I had remained completely independent, I might have been able to manage that. But I was a full-time activist. I really was a full-time activist when I was in college. I was doing media, but I wasn't a journalist. And when I became a journalist, when I took a job, I was like, I can't do both. I very clearly understood I cannot do both. Cannot do both. And so, and I worked for companies where it was very clear, right? And so ethically, you will not see me at a protest marching, and unless I'm covering it. Not that I wouldn't want to be there, but the one time that I did go when I wasn't a journalist was with my son. I was on maternity leave. I wasn't covering it, and we went to the immigration protest of Washington, D.C. in 1996. Not like this story's been around forever, but anyway. But yeah, no, I don't donate money. I don't sign petitions. I don't, like when people want to talk about activism, I'm like, it's been so long that I don't really understand it's not what I'm seeped in. Not like I wouldn't love to be, but then I'd have to literally just be like, yo, okay, I'm leaving this over here. Now let's talk about how we're going to do this. How are we going to organize? How are we going to, because I was doing that in college. But that's not what I'm doing now. As a journalist, I'm actually wearing other hats, right? I have to be a journalist, but I also have to be a businesswoman. Now I'm running a nonprofit, so it's not about give me your money so I can make money, right? It's I need money because I'm doing this for the good, not because I want to make money. So I have to shift my code switching in terms of being a businesswoman and being a journalist. And so when people say you're an activist, I'm like, I'm an activist for democracy. I'm an activist for the Constitution. I'm an activist for the truth. And the fact that you don't cover these stories, I say to the mainstream, and the fact that Ida B. Wells wanted to or that I want to does not make us into activist journalists. We're journalists. The fact that you don't see that as a story is your problem, not mine. But you don't get to decide what is objective and balanced anymore, because we understand that we are equals to you. The way that I can have that kind of power as I'm an equal to you, Robert Siegel, so don't you call me an immigration advocate one more time, Robert Siegel? And I adore Robert, and I would say that he did it to me, I think, like in a room, I was actually at CUNY, in another thing, in another building. And he did that, and I know Robert, so I could say this to him. But I was like, why are you doing that? Don't call me that, because then I'm going to have to call you an activist for European American issues. I'm going to have to call you an activist for British politics or French, Robert. So I actually have to, in many ways, remain clean, right? And very firm on why you cannot label me an activist. Why you cannot, why I will not allow you to do that, and then discredit me as a result.
Thank you so much for that speech and presentation. My question has to do more with about survival in the newsroom. I find that it does take a toll on Latinas and Latinos surviving in such, white spaces that we're always fighting for our stories, and it does wear on us. And how does someone survive that who doesn't get burned out and maybe even do their own thing?
Well, one, if you do get burned out, then you should do your own thing. So that's, I need to, again, I'm trying to reflect back the power that you guys have. And I know it's very scary, but coño, life is scary. So, so if you do get burned out because you want to do your own thing, then that may not necessarily be a bad thing, right? There's need for us wherever we may be. And then on the other hand, surviving inside those newsrooms, you've got to find your team. You've got to find your way. I don't know what your way is going to be, but you got to find your way. Usually it's having a few people who are not your husband or partner who's going to be sick of hearing the same, and then, my husband was like, it's a series of guys who have been a problem in your life, as you're working for one year it's named this person, and the other year it's named this person, and he looks at me now and he's like, do you remember, are they important in your life now? And I'm like, no. So, so to put into perspective, you've got to have that team, and then you've got to find ways of self-care and self-love, whatever they may be. I'm a maniac in terms of working out. That's more recent. That's like the intensity is more intense now than it was even 10 years ago. Just because otherwise I would go crazy. If I wasn't working out seriously, I would be crazy. I would. So it's good that I'm working out.
I have a question. Okay. So, and this is something I've been meaning to ask you actually for a long time, but this is the first time we actually meet. We launched the Spanish language program 2 years ago. Some of our pioneers are sitting here around me, and they're already in the market. And then the second cohort is graduating in December, and we have a third generation joining us in August. And I've been learning about recruiting strategies and how to find the amazing bilingual talent in this country to come to this program. So the classes are half in Spanish, half in English. They get a specific training in how to better cover Latino communities and how to learn the history and how to detect how it's being covered, especially by mainstream media, and how to change that coverage. And I've met, and I won't say it's a big number of people, but there is a significant number of applicants who come because they are tempted to do this program, and they are bilingual, they are Latinx, and they feel it's exactly what they want to do. But then they have second thoughts, and they tell me that they won't do it because they don't want to be pigeonholed. They don't want to be covering Latino stories for the rest of their lives, because actually that's what they want to do, but it feels like a bad career move, and it feels dangerous. So what would you say to them? Because I don't know what to say to them.
By the way, I'm glad that you started about small markets, because if anybody wants to work in Wichita, they're looking to hire television talent. They were just like, please, we need, bilingual. It was Telemundo is looking for, so.
We'll post it.
I get it. I understand. If you would have asked me 10 years ago in 2010 if my company would be, the anchor of my company would be Latino USA and the anchor of my career would be Latino USA, I would have been like, no, really? Pero that's how it turned out. And it's actually the thing that is the core of what we do. And it's only growing. Latino USA's numbers on the radio grew by 45% last year. 45% audience growth. So thank you. So I understand, and I think what I would do is I would become fluent in the code switching part of it. So I would be doing some work that is whatever general market, and also doing Latino. So that's how I would do it, so that it shows, and that actually is the best kind of journalism, right? That shows that you're really flexible, because general assignment correspondence, that's oftentimes the way we first started. You've got to be able to cover everything. So I also feel like you've got to trust your gut. I have students who are completely committed in saying, I only want to work in the Latino market. I want to work bilingually. That's my space. There's going to be a lot of work for them. You know, maybe it's not going to be in the networks that we know standing, but there's going to be a lot of work. So, but I also understand other journalists who are like, but I want to report on, you know, the environment, and it really doesn't, for me, it's not so much an issue of identity. Chulísimo. I just feel like you should flow with it and try, I guess here's what I'm getting at. Try not to feel like there's such a conflict there. I think so much for us as Latinos and Latinas is that we often are living in conflict, right? Because we're like, you know, soy de aquí, soy de allá, am I an imposter, am I not? Do I speak enough Spanglish, or do I speak enough English or Spanish? You know, and it's like we're always kind of like, and we move in those spaces oftentimes trepidatiously and maybe sometimes around a lot of fear, right? Because we don't have a lot of role models who are showing us how to do it. And I guess what I'm trying to say is just flow with it. Understand that the future of the profession is very much in flux, and you're going to have to be able to, you know, in Portuguese, jogo de cintura, you know, juego de cintura, you're going to have to do that. Try not to make it into a battle between am I only doing Latino or am I doing general market. Try to be much more kind of flowing and integrated, right? Some of the big stories that I did, right, on war zones happened to be in Latin America, but it could have ended up that I would have been in, you know, in Iraq. Although my husband, that was the one thing where he just said, please, it's the only thing I ask you, please don't go to the Middle East. And that was where I was like, okay. Other than that, he never said no to anything, which is kind of amazing. I think that little bell that went off said our time is up. I just want to really thank you. And again, my hope to you, God, I'm seeing all these people who I know. Now that I gave the speech, hello, everybody who I know. I see you. I guess my message back to you is to, one, I don't wake up totally feeling powerful. I don't wake up like, yes! I wake up crying, right? So I get that. But then, because look, what we're facing is really tough. But it's like, okay, we have privilege. Vámonos a trabajar. What am I going to do to get out of this? So if I'm feeling this way, what about the people who have no real sense of power? That's where our responsibility is. Damn it, I didn't want to cry. But you're applauding because I'm crying. That's not good. But I want to reflect back to you that something that is at our core of good journalism is humanity. It's really at our core. So stay in touch with it. Hold on to it. Hold on to the cultural wealth that you have. Hold on to it as you walk in our profession. And don't give up. Thank you.